our normal story of our place in the world is not very comforting, because it kind of puts us at the mercy of all sorts of forces over which we have no control. Well, that would be dismal if that were true. And what's dismal is that so many people believe that, and they have no idea what one of the major teachings of the Course is that our experience, our physical experience, our health experience, our every aspect of life experience is being created moment by moment by moment through the focus of my attention.
There's a lot of mystics on the internet. Shout out and much love, you crazy fools, that could use dusting off a textbook or two warmly, without judgment. And secondarily, there are certainly a lot of scholars in academia who would be well served by eating a mushroom. So I'm trying to bridge those two worlds. I'm Bob Peck, and this is Karmic Relief.
My background is in documentary film and comparative religion. I wrote a book called Original Sin is a Lie: How Spirituality Defies Dogma and Reveals Our True Self.
It's an interview show where I talk to spiritual teachers, activists, scholars, people that live within these traditions and also appreciate the overlap. What happens when you start to get activated internally, that makes you activated in a compassionate way in the world. I'm thrilled to be talking to fantastic, inspiring human beings. I have to do much less work, which is nice, because I'm just asking them questions about their story. It's a life hack.
Hi.
I hope you'll enjoy these explorations, these really excavations. In the ones I've filmed so far, they've all been really beautiful and deep and lighthearted. So please enjoy Karmic Relief. I'm Bob Peck. I wrote Original Sin is a Lie, and now I'm asking a bunch of questions to intelligent, compassionate humans.
Carol Howe has been studying A Course in Miracles for nearly 50 years. She heard about it a year after it was published and has not stopped learning from A Course and unlearning from this world of illusion. Carol's focus in teaching ACIM is the practical healing of relationships, that the people in our lives are helpers to be mirrors to what we're doing to ourselves. This self-study curriculum, spiritual masterpiece, and mystical thought system helps us release our guilt and shift into true forgiveness, which enables us to awaken from the dream. Carol also had a very close friendship with the late, great Bill Thetford, who was the Co-Scribe of the Course. She knew Ken Wapnick and many other early Course teachers. Her biography of Bill, Never Forget to Laugh, is absolutely wonderful, and it's a touching tribute to Bill and how the Course came together. Enjoy Carol's endless wisdom and lightheartedness. It's clear she's traversed the depths in this material and in her own life for many decades.
But I wanted to begin, Carol, by thanking you so much for Never Forget to Laugh, which is such a profound piece. That smile.
Yes, it's like, yes, and Bill Thetford was one profound, amazing human being, and it was very, very, very clear to me that the world could not get along without his story being out there one way or the other. Plus, he had a great deal to do with the writing of it, if you're ever interested in knowing how that worked.
Absolutely. Yeah. For those who are unaware of Bill Thetford, he was, as Carol just described him, the co-scribe of A Course in Miracles. He's not always given that title. And I think a lot of what, Carol, your close relationship with him, it has to do with you kind of pointing that out to say, no, actually, Bill was right there. And you have a great photo of him with the ACIM typewriter. I mean, Carol is, for folks who are not familiar with Carol Howe, there's a picture on her website next to Jerry Jampolsky, Bill Thetford, and Ken Wapnick. So you're kind of like, you're in the apostles of, you're among them in ACIM.
Hilarious.
Quite the crew.
It was what was hilarious about it was, of course, I had done gazillions of workshops, but this is the first time the four of us had done this together. And so we met the night before. It was down in Southern California, and we were having dinner. And I said, Jerry, do you have some sort of a plan? He was the one that was contacted about this. And he said, yes, because I was used to like giving some thought. If I was going to do an all-day workshop, I didn't just walk in completely cold. I would have some idea, like, what's the most important topics to talk about and so on. He said, yes, I have a plan. It's like, oh, good. What is it? And he said, I'm going first, and then Ken, and then you, and then Bill. I said, that's the plan. He said, yep, that's the plan.
Pass the mic.
That's right.
We'll just invoke the Holy Spirit.
That's right.
Beautiful. Well, I do want to ask about your background. I have a couple of questions about Bill. I think, the audience, people who follow my work, I wrote a book called Original Sin is a Lie, which is my provocative title. And I tease A Course in Miracles about halfway through as a spiritual masterpiece. I've been studying it personally for about 15 years to your 47. But it's such a profound work, and so we'll definitely talk a lot about ACIM and its practical use. And I'm a big fan of Yogananda, and I've seen in one of your interviews you read out a biography of a yogi.
Oh,
you read
yeah.
all the Eastern stuff a long time ago as well.
Absolutely. I was consumed by finding out everything I could. So I had done 25 solid years of research into everything spiritual, psychological that was available before the course came along. So I had a very solid background to jump into this. So it was not surprising. It was amazing, but it was not like, oh my gosh, I've never heard of any of this before.
Right. Which was good, because I think a lot of people that are new to a course understand can all you got to do is read a couple of pages and realize, like, you need to have typically some familiarity with mystic philosophy, or it's going to be so bizarre to you that you might not keep reading, or your ego doesn't want you to.
Right.
And so, just give us a little background there when you are initially becoming exposed to a course, and kind of the early days of your friendship with Bill.
The early days, it was obviously some kind of a very meant to be thing that I met him in the first place, because the course was published in 1976. I discovered it through happenstance a year later in 1977, and I met Bill in 1978. And the short version of that is that's when I lived here in Denver before. I'm in Denver now. I was in Denver then, but for 33 years in the middle, I lived in Florida. So I'm recently back. So I received an invitation from an organization that I did not belong to. And it was about the fact that Judy Scutch Whitson was going to be through town giving a lecture at a men's college out on the west side of town. And then as a kind of a extra piece of information, it said, oh, and Bill Thetford will be there also. It's like, well, I would crawl on my hands and knees all the way across the town to meet Bill, because by that time I was the world's biggest fan of the course. And that said, he's not going to be speaking, but he would be there. So it's like, okay, well, and Judy, I had heard before, fabulous speaker. So but what they didn't say is that they were going to set up chairs outside. Well, it was in early May, and in Denver, outside in early May can be really cold. So I didn't go prepared for sitting outside. So after Judy, who was a wonderful speaker, had been presenting for about 45 minutes or whatever, I thought, I am
the publisher of A Course in Miracles, or the initial publisher of A Course in Miracles.
Yes, absolutely. Judy, and a wonderful speaker. She was a wonderful woman. And I thought, I am freezing to death in my little lightweight sweater. So I thought, I'm just going to get up and open the first door I can see over here, and just so I won't freeze to death. So I opened the door. It was a large room. And there, standing in the corner, was this tall, handsome man. And I thought, that is Bill Thetford. So I had a chance to visit with him for about 10 minutes, and I was just spellbound. His presence and his energy was amazing. And about that time, everybody else decided to follow suit. The doors opened and everybody else came running in the room as well. So I thought, well, that's amazing. And I kept sort of thinking about him all during the summer. Like, just he couldn't, and it's not like I knew him. It's not like there was a personal relationship I kept thinking about. It's just he kept showing up in my mind. Well, long story short, it turns out that a friend of mine who was a massage therapist was going to Tiburon, where they live, where they moved to do some advanced training. And so I thought, you know what? I think I'll just write a letter to Bill Thetford and see if he and my friend Jason might have a chance to visit. And to my astonishment, and I didn't know where to send it except to the Foundation for Inner Peace. I wouldn't possibly know where he lived. So I got a phone call from him. And he said, yes, I would be happy to meet your friend. And are you going to come out too? And I said, well, no, I'm just making, an entree for him. And the next day I thought, what do you mean I'm not going out to? I have an invitation from Bill Thetford to come to San Francisco, and I'm saying no. So out I went. And he was a gay man. He was actually a bisexual man. So my husband was not worried about the fact that I was going out to see some strange man in San Francisco. And sort of the rest is history. We became fast friends from day one. And from that time on, I spent a lot of time going back and forth between Denver and San Francisco for things related to the course, and also because Jerry Jampolsky and I ended up doing a great many projects together. And then Bill would come and stay with us, so Bill was at my house and I was at his house, and it was splendid. What can I say?
It seems like he really stumbled into all of these different events in his life. The way that you frame his biography, which I'm about halfway through, I was hoping to finish before our call. Maybe we'll have to do a follow-up later.
Yeah.
But and there's also a really great interview of him on YouTube that's an audio only, of him kind of explaining some aspects around his story as well. And he's such a kind of happenstance hero.
Yes.
I love his humility and his humor of just kind of, Carl Rogers just happened to select him,
exactly.
despite
and he
credentials.
could be the absolutely funniest person on the planet. He could have been a stand-up comic. And of course, that was only one of his many amazing traits, but he was a very, very, very funny guy. When he and Hugh Prather, do you know who Hugh Prather is, the author? Oh, he's an amazing author. Well, when he and Hugh Prather would get together, it was simply side splitting. One time he came to visit us a lot. He came out. And so my husband and I and another couple and Bill drove down to Santa Fe, where Hugh and Gail lived, and we spent the weekend. The entire weekend, from the time we got there to the time we left, we all laughed until we cried the whole time, because Hugh's a very funny guy. Bill's a very funny guy. And the way they played off of each other was beyond description. It's too bad people like you weren't there to record that entire episode.
I believe it. I believe it. And the title of the book, just to be clear for people, is called Never Forget to Laugh. Which is A Course in Miracles students will probably recall the verse, into eternity where all is one, there crept a tiny mad idea at which the Son of God remembered not to laugh.
Exactly. That's right where it came from.
and honoring Bill's comedy there. There's one particular juxtaposition that I wanted to talk to you before we get into A Course teachings in particular, which is he actually calls this out in that lecture, and just you as his biographer know this much more intimately, but essentially he's studying working with the late great Dr. Carl Rogers, who is, he's on top 5. Some people put him right under Freud in terms of influence and impact in psychotherapy. And his famous concept among many was unconditional positive regard, which you write about. And that's the same time period that America is unleashing the atomic bomb in New Mexico and eventually, sadly, in Japan. And Bill calls out the great paradox of the atomic study of kind of unconditional evil or unconditional fear when he's
Yeah.
studying under unconditional positive regard, unconditional love.
Right. That's right.
And so he's working with Carl Rogers. There's also a period in between the work with Rogers and before he meets Helen at Columbia and the course comes. There's a middle period, which is
Yes.
significant as a Central
CIA.
Intelligence Agency.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did want to ask you, I mean, as a deeply devoted ACIM student and kind of fan and evangelist, even though you're not supposed to do that,
Oh,
I'm
I'm
not
very
knocking on doors.
evangelical myself.
Right, right.
Understand that.
We're almost knocking on doors with, of course,
Yeah.
asking if they've read it. No, but he, that this point about Bill's employment history has
Mhm.
come up that I've seen on kind of spiritual internet, in spiritual TikTok, in spiritual Instagram, from some people who are not, in my view, who are not as familiar with A Course in Miracles, as a way to invalidate it, Carol,
Yes,
in some ways.
years and years and years ago, when I was searching something on the internet, I found totally 100% false, not just a misunderstanding, but totally false information is being written about him and his work with the CIA that
Yeah.
was totally not true. He was interested in like how personalities develop and so on and so forth, not his work was not about using the CIA in its sort of adversarial type positions or spying positions or something like that. And I had the great good fortune, which I think was in the book, that about 8 years before I wrote the book, I got a phone call from some strange guy in New York who turned out he was moving to Florida and somebody had told him to call me. Turns out he had worked with Bill at the CIA. And it's like, if this is not being helped, I don't know what it is, because he gave me entree to people who were still alive who had worked with Bill, and I could talk to them directly, get all the very straight scoop about exactly what his role was, and so on and so forth. So it was like, I can't tell you how much it was like Bill was guiding all the right people to show up and the right opportunities to show up in putting his most possible accurate story together. That is not an accident.
Right. Of course. And that's how we all see it. And, in the way the dream unfolds and
Mhm.
under guidance of the spirit, and I think I wanted you to speak to that. And again, let's point people to the biography, Never Forget to Laugh, for anyone who's hesitant, or, I think the worst of it, to kind of, to your point, is like, I've seen people that have said, oh, kind of CIA, MK Ultra, and it's just
Exactly.
such a
And nothing
preposterous claim.
possibly have been further. That's the nonsense that's on the internet that, as we know, unfortunately, there's a lot of, and the unknowing wouldn't know that that's nonsense. They might think,
Yeah.
oh, that's really true, which is too bad.
It is too bad. So I wanted to just call that out instead of kind of
Yes.
submerging that, which you do a great job. I mean, you have a chapter in his
Yes.
period in the CIA.
Mhm.
So, and kind of one thing I say is, there's a lot of conspiratorial things about, Meta platforms, Facebook and Instagram's company, for example. That's my day job. So
Yes.
I work there, and it's like, does that mean that my work is tainted by some, it's like, no, of course.
No.
It's just my day job. It's how I make a living with advertisers on the internet. I'm
Mhm.
not, corrupting my spiritual message, whatever,
Exactly.
through that
Exactly.
association. So just wanted to point that out. But yeah, happily pointing folks to Carol's book there. And you've written multiple books. You have a lot of really great programs on your website. You have a really awesome YouTube channel, kind of jumping in to the Course in Miracles, the value that it provides as a practical kind of manual, really, for life. One of your courses is called The Way It Works, or what is life is.
See how life works.
See How Life Works.
Yes.
Yes, which
A young man who I knew down in Florida called me one day and he said, I'd like to talk to you about something. It's like, okay. And he said he was a young, budding, and already very successful filmmaker. And now he has international awards all stacked up. But nevertheless, he said, would you be willing to film all these models you've made over the years? And if nobody knows what that is, I would understand that, because there has never been anything before or since. But I get everything that I've done about the course, I've gotten guidance to do. I've kind of been told to do it. And the way I describe it is often I will just sit and just be open and listen. And I call them like my guidance telegrams. It's almost like information comes from the left-hand side and kind of travels across my awareness. And so this was back in about 20, I don't remember what, a long time ago, 2016 or something. And it was like, build a model that makes everything about relationships clear. It was a little more, and it's like, with no information about how I'm supposed to do this. So it's like following intuition. And so that got built. And then over several years came the instruction to do 6 more. It was like, and so, and when I say models, I mean big models. I mean, some of them are like 8 or 9 feet tall with moving parts and things that throw up in the air. And so, in other words, they're all making the points about forgiveness and healing and all of the major topics that would be covered in the course. Not that there are chapters on that in the course, but by how the course would be involved in these major topics of life. And so
and
that
perhaps, maybe that's a good segue into the conceptual here, in terms of it. I feel like you've probably given the movie trailer synopsis of a course probably 10,000 times, but in
probably,
terms of what it's, or more, but
yeah,
what's, in terms of its practical usage. Like I said, most people listening to this are probably familiar, but maybe not, so let's make sure that people are aware in terms of this spiritual masterpiece, this non-dual document. What is it advocating for us?
it's like it's advocating our completely reorienting everything we believe basically about cause and effect, because we're taught, the world is solid and real and that we're somehow small players in it, and that there are all sorts of forces beyond ourselves that kind of dictate. In other words, our normal story of our place in the world is not very comforting, because it kind of puts us at the mercy of all sorts of forces over which we have no control. Well, that would be dismal if that were true. And what's dismal is that so many people believe that, and they have no idea what one of the major teachings of the course is that our experience, our physical experience, our health experience, our every aspect of life experience is being created moment by moment by moment through the focus of my attention. My thoughts instantly translate into my physical world. And one of the things that it stresses is we need to unlearn the things that we have learned, which of course is what it's about, and that we will do our healing through relationships. Because I have counseled so many hundreds of people, I have completely lost track. And every single person has got the same incorrect idea, which is whatever most people never make appointments because they have a problem with the weather. It's always somebody. It's a person, either usually somebody known to them, a work affiliate or a family member or neighbor or somebody. And the belief that absolutely is promoted in everything we've been taught is that we're at the mercy of how other people decide to treat us. And so we learn manipulation skills and we learn all kinds of nonsense. And the actual fact is that the course makes over and over and over again is that the people who show up in our lives are helpers, to be mirrors to what we are doing to ourselves. In other words, it will say guilt is the big culprit. It's totally unwarranted. And the problem is, some of us might go, yes, I feel guilty about X, Y, and Z. Maybe they don't talk about it, but they carry that with them. The problem is we carry unconscious guilt that we don't even know we're carrying. And since guilt is always a request for punishment and it's always going to be answered, then it's like we're walking around in the dark. In other words, by believing things and carrying notions with us that we don't even know about. So the people we consider our problem people really need to be we need to reinvest in them, as they are saving our lives, because they're showing us what we are doing to ourselves. Because if we can ever get that guilt is a request for punishment that will always be answered, not just sometimes. So the uncovering of where that really comes from, which is never warranted, but the very 2 or 3 sentences related to that is, before we're 3 years old, the left brain is physically functional. I mean, physically present, but not functional. The right brain, which is all that a little person up until about age 3 has to work with, you're just having experience, but there's no way to think about the experience you're having. But in those early years, with the immature brain running the show, we develop notions about ourselves that are not true. But because they developed so early, we have no idea that they're a big lie and aren't true. So we carry guilt with us. And the whole purpose of this is to completely, among other things, help us see where that comes from so we can let it go. It's why it makes a big point of you can't heal by yourself sitting in the desert someplace, because there's nobody there to help you see what you were punishing yourself for. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, beautifully put. No, absolutely. And there's a few angles I want to go based on that. One quote comes screaming out of your lovely, succinct explanation, which is, when a brother acts insanely, he's offering you an opportunity to bless him. His need is
Yes.
yours. You need the blessing you can offer him. There is no way for you to have it except by giving it. I mean, the ball just unravels in this text constantly of just
And you see
incredible brilliance.
the part of the major other actual truth that most of us aren't taught in life. If you study metaphysics and spirituality and the things that you and I and many people have been interested in forever, you learn and then begin to live out of the truth that our physical world, both our inner feelings and the physical world we live in, is constantly being created by the focus of attention in our own minds. So and you can't say, well, I don't think I'd like for that to be happening. Well, you don't get to say, I don't like for this to be happening, because that's the way life works. And so if I carry animosity or fear or distress or hatred or ill wishes toward somebody else, the fact that those thoughts are in my mind, guess who they're going to accrue to? Me. So the notion that what I want to do is to learn, I want to wish everybody well. I want to know that everybody's doing the highest and best they can, given all of the false beliefs out of which they're operating. And so if I could learn, oh, the very simple thing, here are 2 very simple things that go together, is the past doesn't exist. We've all grown up thinking the past kind of follows along behind us like a big growing pile of, I don't know what, experience. That's not true. The past isn't stored. The moment that a word or a deed is spoken, it ceases to exist. It's like, well, that's helpful to know about. And if it doesn't exist, And the moment that I'm in is the only moment there is. And in this only moment there is, I've only got two choices. I either can follow my ego mind and my beliefs and my, I've got to protect myself and they're the bad guys and they're the good, all that kind of stuff, which you will never like the results of that. Never, ever. That will never work out. Or in this brand new clean moment, and see, every second is a brand new clean moment, I can decide I want to follow my intuition or my guidance, which is always present. And I absolutely want to be truly helpful. Those are your two choices. This one will bring you a life that you won't like at all. This one, and you see, the great thing is a lot of people go, oh, but I've got to undo all of this stuff. No, it's already been undone for you. All you have to do is change your mind about where do you want to focus your all-powerful attention now. And it's much, much more fun, as well as more profitable, more exciting, more everything else, to just keep listening to that intuition tell you, do this, call this person, move to Denver, like whatever.
To your point, it's an immensely practical and pragmatic system. I mean, it's the
Yes.
pragmaticist. I mean, right? It's
Yes,
completely focused on
it's the
utility.
most pragmatic of all, because wanting to be truly helpful to others and let go of our judgment and our past brings us the greatest joy, as well as being as helpful in every possible way to somebody else. Well, if that's not the win-win of the century, I don't know what is.
Here, here.
Yeah.
There's a really great one of the points that you were making there reminded me. There's a line from Rumi. He says, how will your mirror be clean if you're irritated by every rub?
Yes.
Which is the mystics kind of all
Yes.
have this
Yes.
perennial
Yes.
imagery.
We cannot get away from the teaching. Any place you really look, if you're serious
Right.
about this, that your world is your mirror. Take a look at your world. If you are impoverished, if you're sick, if things don't work out, then you go, you're not being mistreated by some force outside yourself. You're believing in your guilt and the guilt of others, and you can't turn off the punishing aspect of guilt. So when we can go, it is absolutely to my advantage and everybody else's advantage to be as helpful to everybody else and myself as possible. This is not being uh, virtuous. This is just being sensible.
Right. It's rational at this point. Let me ask a master, of course, in miracles teacher, of which you certainly are one, around the kind of from my vantage point, Carol, I do see a lot of kind of confusion or kind of myth busting necessary around non-duality and the illusion. And this is not a topic that you're new to. It's something that Ken Wapnick, I think, helped, of course, Miracle students address, something that I see a lot of spiritual commentators try to traverse in Advaita, Vedanta, and kind of, all of these systems that say, they're ultimately, this is but a dream, while that is completely true. I mean, I think the term that a course uses, or at least Ken Wapnick used in terms of framing the course, was called level confusion.
Yeah.
Right. So speak to us about that in terms of, what I kind of see it as is like almost like addressing the misconception that this is naivete of saying, oh, just everything's hunky dory. That's
exactly.
not
A
quite
lot
it
of
either.
people go, oh, well, this is just an illusion, so it doesn't count. I don't have to do anything about it. I don't have to do any reparative. And it's like, in the most accurate metaphysical sense of the world, that's an accurate statement. That is not a helpful statement if I'm going to live my daily life, so to speak. In other words, I have to recognize I live in a house and drive a car and I have weather to deal with and learning and a living to earn, and so on and so forth. So rather than going, I'm going to kind of tune out of this because it's an illusion, it is misinterpreting you're mixing levels, so to speak, which is not helpful. And so rather than saying, oh, this is an illusion, which in the big picture it is, but that isn't practical because of what we believe. It's like, that's why I'm going to be a big advocate for absolutely following your intuition, which is always going to be loving, helpful, and healing in nature, even if it might be scary or frightening or weird or whatever that you don't understand in the beginning. And to set aside the conversation even about this being an illusion, and how can I be as helpful in the circumstances, by whatever name we wish to call it, that we find ourselves.
Yeah, don't get caught off guard by the kind of conceptual frameworks about it all. Just try to be helpful, try to be loving.
Absolutely.
One thing that I've kind of been working on in terms of developing this idea to help people understand and help me understand, I guess, in some ways, is the idea that, for example, I think in kind of activism circles or circles, social justice and kind of, there is corruption and injustice in the world, and I think my generation and the younger generations are kind of more activated than ever, which is very beautiful in some ways and very inspiring. And one of the images from Ram Dass actually was, he said, you can't, it's not going to work if you're angry at a peace rally.
Exactly.
You got to have peace on everyone, and
Yes.
so I can think that's kind of my question to you, or kind of what I'm posing to you, is like, it is actually, you can imprison someone, you can imprison their body when
Yes.
they've committed a crime, and
Yes.
still be loving. And and I think actually it's almost less compassionate if you're not upholding
That's
justice.
interesting, because I haven't had any reason to think about this for a long time. But in my long career, I've done a lot of counseling and teaching in jails and in prisons.
Right.
And I actually was asked when I was in California one time to come meet with a group of people on death row in in the big prison out there in San Francisco. And it was
Yeah.
like, um, most of anybody who's listening has never been in San Quentin prison.
Right.
And the huge doors, 3 huge big metal doors that clang down behind you. And so I had a group of guys, maybe 25 or 30 guys. I might as well be talking to a Sunday school class. They
Yeah.
were as sweet and as polite. There were a lot of guards around, which was, and it was like, it was a very odd experience in a way to realize, almost makes me cry to think about it, that a bunch of these guys are going to be executed very soon after they've been to this class. And it's like, so all judgment goes away. I mean, and literally in a case, these guys couldn't have been nicer, and some of their questions could not have been more profound. So we have no grounds for having any judgment about what anybody's doing, recognizing that everybody's always doing the highest and best they can do with the things they believe about themselves and about how the world works.
Absolutely. And I think even zooming out, kind of from the Eastern standpoint, we've all done all these things. We've all been kings and killers and murderers and celebrities and unknowns and rich and poor and fat and skinny. And we've kind of zoomed through all these lifetimes in the blink of an eye. And if we're getting too caught in the persona, then we're stuck.
We are, and that's why if I could wave a flag around, it would be, if you go, yes, all that stuff's true. We've been bad, we've been good, we've been confused, we've been clear, we've been lived a lot of lifetimes in a lot
So
of
it
places.
doesn't really matter,
It
actually.
doesn't matter, because right now, in this moment, if my goal is to be helpful and to be peaceful and to be
Yeah.
as available as possible, then none of that matters. See, it's not like it's following along behind us like a big
Right.
pile of trash.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and there's a particular utterance by the Nazarene when he's being killed on the cross, which is one of the most sublime sayings I think in human civilization. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do.
Exactly.
That's
That
someone who's broken
applies,
the veil.
that applies to every single non-loving thing that anybody ever
Yeah.
does.
There's a universality
Yes.
application to that line. It's not
Yes.
just for the Roman soldiers.
Absolutely.
It's for all these Roman soldiers out here.
Yes, yes, yes.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful. Yeah, I'm re-going through the lessons, which, you know, I've gone through them 3 or 4 times. I think I've heard you in interviews say you've gone through them, you know, maybe 100, or, you know, you lost
It's
count
been
obviously a long time
countless
ago.
times at this
Yeah.
point. Yes.
Yeah, I'm on 11 right now, and you know, the first 50. There was a great interview that I saw of yours recently. You said sometimes folks the first 50, people think, oh, let me get to the good ones, and it's like, oh no, once you've gone through them a few times, the first 50 are
Right.
brutal. I mean, they
That's
pack a
right.
punch, baby.
And it's kind of like with the text itself, it tends to uh, become more profound
Yeah.
as you move toward it. And
Mhm.
I've often said, you know what? If you just dealt with the last 5 chapters and you just read the last 5 chapters
Mm.
over and over, it's like they're just, they encapsulate so much. And there were many, I've probably read it, I don't know, 150 times. I would read it and then I'd start all over and read it again and read it. It was like an addiction or something. It was like, this is so important that I just cannot put it down. But obviously you get to be very familiar with it over the years, but literally, if somebody feels like I can't take on a book this size, I'm not a
Yep.
scholar, I'm not really a good student or whatever, do the lessons. And the thing about the lessons is the lessons are not something to be learned. We keep thinking that anything that's called a lesson from our school days, you've got to learn this because now you're going to regurgitate it on a test later on and get your degree. And it's like those lessons are to be practiced to whatever that idea is in that day. You keep that in mind and you keep applying it and putting it into practice throughout your day, and your whole life can be transformed that way. Well, I would also add just my own personal bias about this. If you feel like you don't have time to read the whole text, read the last 5 chapters over and over and
Mm.
over and over again, and you'll get a great deal out of it.
How amazing. That's very useful. I talk to a lot of people who are interested in reading it or starting it or so and so. Listen to Carol on this one. Yeah, my lesson is my meaningless thoughts are showing me a
A
meaningless
meaningless world.
world,
That's
which
right.
is, I mean, that's so punk rock. I mean, I had a video a few months
Yes.
ago said, I think people think a book called A Course in Miracles
Mhm.
is kind of airy and
Airy fairy.
angelic, airy fairy. And it's like, you
Yeah.
guys, my meaningless
In
thoughts are
fact,
showing me meaningless.
Bill
This is
and
Nietzsche.
Helen thought it was a flaky title too. It's like A Course in Miracles, and so they had to be reassured that yes, this is what the title needs to be.
It really is. I think it's because you have to be not into form to care almost, right?
Yeah.
It's like, the form versus content dichotomy of just none of the form matters whatsoever. So who cares?
And because we have an incorrect notion about what miracles are in the
Right,
first place, like
right.
changing water into wine kind of thing, demonstrating something that's eye-opening or whatever. And it's like, no, it's like shifting your perception so that you can see the love in everything that is. I asked Bill about that one time, like, how do you describe this? And he said that shift in perception that allows you to see the lovingness that maybe the words aren't quite the same, but that's the general idea that's present at the core and at the heart of everything. It's
Beautiful.
like nothing could be better than that.
And you also did a great service with your YouTube channel in reading every lesson with a brief commentary after that. So if anyone's interested in trying the workbook, highly recommend Carol Howe's YouTube channel. And there's like a playlist of all 365, so you can start your day with.
And I didn't do that on purpose. Like everything
You're
I
guided to do that.
which is I was told to do that. And I can remember exactly when that happened. I was standing in my family room. It was at either the end of 2017 or 2018. And I get this inner message that always sounds like a little telegram coming through that says, record all of the lessons with commentary. And I say out loud to nobody else that's in the room, I'm talking to my guidance. I said, you have got to be kidding. Do you have any idea how long it would
take a long time?
All of those lessons, with all of the time that has to be given to what is the most appropriate commentary to go with it. I'm just appalled at this assignment. And it just goes, it's not interested in my commentary. It just says, record all the lessons with commentaries. Like, okay, it was a massive, massive task. And the same when all of a sudden the message came to do with the audio book of the text itself, which I did more recently, a couple of days ago.
I did not know that. You read the entire text.
Yes, it's on my website.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
That
and
is a treat.
That was another thing. It was like, do you know how long this book is? And recording,
Spirit knows how long it is.
It's recording short things like the lessons. You may make a mistake or two, but when you're recording for hours and hours at a time, pretty soon your tongue, which is a muscle, kind of like gives out and there'll be garbled stuff. Or usually I always remember to turn off the phone, but there all of a sudden, maybe there will be thunder, right? In other words, there'll be all kinds of reasons why you've got to split the track, take out a few seconds worth, put the right thing back in, put it back together so that it's seamless. Well, you do that hundreds of times in a recording like that. So nobody really has any possible idea about all of the time and effort and expertise goes into creating these kinds of audio works. But I wouldn't undo it for anything. I remember when I was given that instruction, it's like, what? It's like, you really got to be kidding on this one.
Well, you signed up to be truly helpful.
Apparently
right?
so.
At some point, you signed the contract.
Exactly. So I'm not sorry for 1 second of time that I've spent making and it's what we did all our videos about as well. So now you've got a visual, really, and I'll tell you, we were given so much help. First of all, I met somebody who was my partner for about 15 years. About the time I started getting these messages about building these models. These are very complicated moving parts, all kinds of things happen in these models. No way in the world I would be able to do anything like that. I'm not a carpenter or anything like that. But this man was a genius at that, an absolute genius at building anything. And so he arrived in my life right when I was given this assignment to do this in the first place. But one of the fascinating things that just is, if anybody needs proof that we're taken care of when we're following our intuition about being helpful, this program has got 8 parts to it. And we recorded once a month for 2 hours. We had to get there 4 hours ahead of time to get everything set up and everything done that needed to be done.
Which one is this, by the way?
This is called See How Life Works.
Yes. Okay,
That
great.
program called See How Life Works. The
Terrific.
first one is kind of an explanation about where the course comes from. The other 7 are the presentation of these models, which are making a point. Are you still there?
Yes. Now I'm just sharing the page here.
Oh, okay. So
Yes.
there's the
8
self.
weeks.
It's on the website when you can go to programs, and there it is.
Right. And then you're talking about the master class here.
No, I'm talking, well, the master class could go with it, but the one that's called See How Life Works.
Right.
So the master class came later. I recorded that
Okay.
with a different group of people later.
Okay,
But
great. Week
but
1, foundation for a course, and then
down here
ego invention.
where it says number 7. So we're beginning to record number 7. And when we went in, which was about 4 hours ahead of time, as always, it was being recorded in a great big clubhouse part of where my filming partner's condo was. And this was, you know, how the big community center, they have a big, beautiful space. And there was always the manager there, you know, when anybody was coming in to rent the space. So we go in there and the fire alarm is going off. And it's like and he would stop it. And every minute or two, the fire alarm, it was like, we can't do this, because the fire alarm, obviously, a fire alarm is designed to be heard every place in the building, including this big room next door where we are. And I said, can't we call the fire department, have them come fix this right away? We got plenty of time. He said, no, the fire department's not open on Sunday. Well, obviously it would be open to go to a fire, but it's not open to do anything else. And I said, this is kind of catastrophic, you know, because there's no way to when you're editing, to take out that sound without taking out whatever is being said at the same moment. This is a complete impossibility. I want you to know that when we start, it's like, well, I don't know what to do. Here are all the people here, plus what's behind the scenes that nobody can see. There's about 45 more people behind the cameras, because I had a bunch of people said, oh no, we want to come see this as well. So there's a
live audience.
Well, yes, so there's a whole batch of people back there beside the 15 people. And those 15 people range from people I know, people I don't know, people who are course students, people who are not course students. So it's a real mix. It's not just a bunch of my pals have come in to be the class. I want you to know that the moment I moved myself to the microphone and started to talk, the fire alarm stopped and it never went off again. Now, talk about a marvelous example is that we're given whatever help we need when our goal is to be truly helpful, including somehow magically the fire alarm went off and never came on again, ever. What do you think about that?
It's incredible. When's your memoir?
It's like, I do want to write that if I can hang in here long enough to do that.
If you're told to, right? If you're called to.
As well as the other this whole process that I take everybody through all the time when they come, you know, call for counseling assignments, because it's the same process works for every single person on the planet. So I must get that written as well.
Amazing. And are you still taking clients, by the way? For one-on-one, or
yes, I'm swamped with clients.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Are you full capacity, or?
Yes, it's like I'm swamped with clients. I have house guests from Florida, you know, kind of parading through, which I adore, and writing things and answering millions, it seems like, of questions. So it's like, yes, I'm an elder.
The busiest you've ever been.
I'm probably busier than I've ever been, which is an almost impossible statement, but so be it.
Well, you have my deep gratitude and the spiritual community's deep gratitude. I just recommended someone to you. An old friend of mine has been watching some of my stuff and said, man, I'd really be interested in, you know, kind of spiritual coaching, spiritual counseling. I said, don't look at me. because that's not my business. I'm
Yeah.
writer, philosopher, maybe one-on-one someday, but I'm
Yes.
still a student. I said, however, there's this, master teacher, Dr. Carol Howe, so check her out. So I wonder if James reached out, but happy to continue to point people to you. And, I think maybe as we start to wrap up on valuing your time, the time of no time, give me an example or two, perhaps, in terms of what you just said, which was really profound around, it's always the same process, or it's always the same situation.
It's always very, very briefly, the same process is, here's my problem person. Okay.
Right.
And then I will ask somebody, I'll say, give me just 2 words that describe what you don't like about this person. Well, maybe they're selfish and they're a liar, whatever it may be. And it's like, okay, so let's just have a look and see if you can think ever once in your whole life you've ever been selfish or a liar. And every single person will say, yes. I mean, nobody ever says, nope, never, ever, ever. And then I'll ask them this. It's like,
Not all the time. I'm not always selfish and
exactly.
lying.
And it's like, okay, so here's what I want you to do. Just think of a time in your life, sometime it could be recently, it could be a long time ago, when you yourself, you recognize have been selfish. And I said, I don't want to know anything about what it is. I just want that idea to come up into your mind. I said, you got it? Got it. Say, okay, here's the important part. At that moment, at that time, with what you believed, with what you were experiencing, was there any other choice from your perspective at that time that you could have done differently? And 100% of people will say no. It's like, so you see, you may have been selfish, you may have been an axe murderer, but whatever it was, you were doing the highest and best of which you were capable, given the sense of threat, given the sense of what you believed about yourself, and so on and so forth. And so now we're going to reduce this from a crime that you're carrying guilt around to a mistake that can be corrected. And then I can continue to take them through that correction process.
It's kind of like an instant empathy generation. It's like, oh, wait a second. I deserve love for that, and they deserve love for that.
Exactly. This was not a crime. It was a mistake, because with your state of fear, or with the programming that was operative, or the circumstances in which you found yourself, this seemed the safest and best thing you could do. And
Right.
everybody will agree. And
Right.
if any of us think about it, we realize we are always doing whatever we're doing that's consistent with what we believe about ourselves and everybody else. So as I keep elevating and correcting and expanding the truth and the we will call it, where I am more and more aware of the truth about myself and everybody else, then automatically you won't engage in being mean to somebody or fussing at them, because you'll know perfectly well they're doing the best they can do and they deserve help, not condemnation.
Yeah.
And so it
Beautiful.
gets to be so that really what it ends up being is that you end up with no trouble or difficulties in your life. You might be very busy, but that's not the same as trouble or difficulty. And so there's
Right.
that constant sense of guidance. And I remember about 2 years ago, normally I have been very, very healthy all my life. In fact, I read a book a long time ago about and it was from somebody famous that we've all read, some kind of dictated material. It's like, oh, going to doctors is such a problem, because you're going there to try to find a problem, and you'll always be able to find a problem. So I thought, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. So starting like about 50 years ago, I thought, I'm not ever going again. So for 46 years, I was never in the doctor's office. It's like, I don't need a checkup. I know how to keep myself healthy, so there's no problem about that. So I managed to have a little bout of obviously some sort of incorrect thinking, and I ended up with this sort of abscess on my back. And I went to a clinic since I had no doctor, and it's like, okay, we can do blah, 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 but then you need to go see a dermatologist. So some very good friends had come over and had gone down with me, and they said, we have a dermatologist that we think is wonderful, so add him to the list, add her to the list. It was like, okay, so one of these five was supposed to call me the next day. And so I'm sitting there going, boy, I really, really, really do want Becky and Kim's uh, dermatologist to call, because whoever was the first one to call was the one I needed to go see. I want you to know that as I sat there, and again, there's all the thoughts always seem to come from the left and kind of move across to the right. And it was like this very, very gentle, the gentleness of this, I want to stress, soft message was, it doesn't matter who you go to. Remember, I am the surgeon.
Mm,
And it was
beautiful.
like, with that, any concern went away. And 5 minutes later, the girl's dermatologist called, and she's the one I went to see, and there was no problem, and end of story. But the immediate gentleness and immediate assurance that basically all is well, I'm in charge, cannot be overemphasized.
That's beautiful. One thing that's kind of coming up too for me to talk to you about is like the kind of incremental gains, right? It's like there are these, we've all read the mystics, famous, the Buddha, for example, sitting under the Bodhi tree, becoming enlightened, kind of this instantaneous awakening, that these different men and women
Yes.
throughout history have had. And, for me, it's much more of a slog, but that's okay. And I mean that in a humble way, not in a self-effacing way, just to say, you just make little progress, 3 feet here, 10 feet here. And then years later, you look up and you go, oh, wow, I'm forgiving of myself in this moment, or I'm
And
forgiving of that
as you
person.
do that, and as you get we'll call it positive feedback, your enthusiasm for living your life, following your gardens grows and grows and grows, because you realize any other choice is a totally stupid choice. It's a
Right.
stupid, self-defeating choice not to follow your guidance. So it's not like, pretty soon, it's not like it's a choice. It just becomes an automatic way of living.
You realize over time that any ego-driven thing is just going to bounce off the wall and hit you back on the forehead. I mean, it's like,
That's
why
exactly,
bother?
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And Bill was just marvelous um, at being a roadmap to follow about that. In other words, he just steadily let go of anything that he was still holding on to. And at the end of his life, as I wrote in the book, it was like Jerry picked him up, because he was, by that time he'd moved to Southern California, but he was coming back to be with Judy and Witt, the people who were the publishers of the course, Foundation for Inner Peace, for the 4th of July holiday. And so Jerry picked him up at the airport and said, he had never seen Bill funnier, more lighthearted, more jubilant. And Bill was a very funny, lighthearted guy for a long time anyway. So this was saying something. And Judy's mentioning, as they walked in the door, there was a big wreck that caused them to be very delayed getting to her house. The highway was all stopped up. And she said, when he walked in the door, he was a tall guy anyway, way over 6 feet. And she said it was like his feet wouldn't even stay on the floors, like he was kind of always up on his tiptoes, like he had finally gotten what all this was about. And the joyousness and and he and Witt were talking the next day about how amazing life is when you live it without guilt, whatever their discussion was about. And that 4th of July day, and he walked out, and he had done his work, and he was going to go out for his walk, and 2 houses up, Judy goes out to run her errands, and here he is lying dead on the sidewalk. He just left, as we all say, it makes me cry to think about it, sort of in a burst of glory.
So beautiful. It's
Easily,
so profound.
quickly, right on schedule. He had declared his own freedom,
His own independence.
it was his Independence Day, which makes it so amazing. So every 4th of July, this past 4th of July was no exception.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yogananda famously went out after a lecture, heart attack, just told disciples the day before, I'm going, when
Yes.
you break it, the material form doesn't hold the spirit much longer.
Exactly. That's
There's nothing else waiting it.
It's like you outgrow
Right.
the operating at the physical level. It's like there's nothing left to be learned, at least in this lifetime around. It's now time to move on to what's next.
Well, for the sake of all of us, Carol, I hope you have more things to learn. So you stick around with us and keep writing and making courses.
Me too. I still have things I very much want to do. So I intend to do that for a while.
Well, much gratitude from me and from the Course in Miracles community, spiritual community. Please check out Carol's programs and books if you're interested in someone who is really embodied and immersed, beyond immersed herself in this material. So thank you so much, Carol. Let's stay in touch. Come back and see me later.
Absolutely. You
Amazing.
Just let me know, and we'll take up where we left off.
Sounds beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, dear. Bye.
Bye.